let's take a look at a game that combines two of my favorite things: action RPGs and the virtues of capitalism. And of course, the game we're talking about today is Penny Punching Princess for the Nintendo Switch. Penny Punching Princess originally came out for the PlayStation Vita back in 2016, but only in Japan. However, thanks to the good folks over at NIS America, this game has gotten a Nintendo Switch release, both physically and digitally. And speaking of NIS America, they were kind enough to send me a review copy of this game. So, is Penny Punching Princess worth you spending your pennies on? Well, let's find out in today's review. Welcome to Stuff We Play, where we love awesome attempts at alliteration, and if that sounds cool to you, why not subscribe? And we're looking at Penny Punching Princess for the Nintendo Switch. I should mention, we're looking at the digital version of this game, not the physical version. However, I would quickly like to mention that there is a really awesome physical special edition that looks like it comes with like a gold bar. I don't think it's a real gold bar, but it comes with that and other goodies. And that looks cool. But is any version of this game, physical or otherwise, worth you picking up? Especially since a physical edition, well actually any version of this game, is going to run you 40 bucks American or 55 Canadian. Well, let's find out, and let's jump right into the review. So Penny Punching Princess follows the princess, whose father has died and has left her in debt. And he was in debt to the Dragoloans. Yes, the Dragoloans, I love that name. Who are a bunch of evil, no-good bastards who are wreaking havoc on the land and whatnot. And they've gotten a big army of different monsters and whatnot by, well, putting them in debt. So it's up to you as the princess to go venture across the land, stop the Dragoloans, recruit new monsters to come to your kingdom, and have them fight for you through the practice of bribery. Yeah, this game doesn't really take itself too seriously on the story front, and that's a good thing. It's very lighthearted. I love the writing here, and also the voice acting is solid as well. There's only one major voice role, and that's the narrator. But the narrator is fantastic.
The servant, Sebastian, has been looking after the princess since she was a baby. Therefore, he can read the princess's emotions like an open book. But for the princess, it's just an irritating talent.
The voice presentation, the story is great, but how does it look? Well, it looks fantastic. It's done kind of in that 16-bit-esque art style that's oh so common in indie-style games like this, but it works here. Sprites are big and animate fluidly, there's never any slowdown, and there's so much color here. It's very cartoony in a way, and it's very visually pleasing, and this is aided by a rocking soundtrack. Though perhaps rocking's not the right word. This soundtrack encompasses a wide variety of genres, so yes, you get your fast-paced rocking tunes, but you also get some slower but more tense pieces. What I also appreciate here is that for an action RPG, often in games like this you have one battle theme and you get sick of it because you hear it constantly. I like to call this Sonic Unleashed syndrome. Thankfully, this game does not suffer from this, despite some issues I do have with combat, which we'll get to in a second. Each area in Penny Punching Princess has a different battle theme, and all of them are great. I should specify, I've only made it to World 4 so far. I have not beaten the game. We'll get to that as well in just a sec. The presentation is phenomenal. It looks great. It plays great. And the gameplay is functionally sound. It's an action RPG, so you run forward, you slash through enemies, but the big mechanic here is bribery. Gaining loot is an essential part of most RPGs, but here it serves another purpose. You can actually take any money you gain from defeating enemies or collecting from treasure chests and whatnot and use it to bribe enemies. Use that using this device called the calculator gauge. So thus, while you're running around, you can bring it up and input a code, yes, in the middle of combat, of how much money you want to say. So say you have an enemy that costs 500 gold to recruit, then you input 500. But that sounds tedious, but don't worry, because by pressing the ZR button, immediately after pressing the ZL button, which brings up the calculator gauge, it will lock on to whatever enemy's closest, and that can be very helpful. But it's not just enemies you can bribe. You can bribe stage hazards as well. Everything from lotus flowers that spew poison to these giant hammers to, yes, even doors. Doors, you can bribe doors. And of course heal points as well. What, you think they'd let you heal for free? Also of note, before we move on from the calculator gauge, is you do have some special abilities. So there's several different types of these abilities. One restores health, one gives you extra power, one gives you a huge burst of gold. I know, you pay gold, then you get more gold in return. If only earning money in real life was that easy. And they work great. My main issue that I have with the calculator gauge is sometimes in the midst of battle, you'll bring it up and you'll try to attack, but you're kind of really fumbling to input, especially when there's a huge crowd of enemies, because then you can get lost, and then before you know it, you've died while trying to input something on the calculator gauge. I feel like this awkwardness arises because the calculator gauge controls or amounts to these, I'm going to call them the D buttons, these directional buttons right here. You use the left joystick to move, but you have to use these to move around the calculator gauge and menus. I feel like if there was an option to use the right joystick for these, that would alleviate a lot of pain. Granted, you can do more than just bribery in battle. You have a sword which you can use a weak attack with, and then you can charge up a punch, hence the punch and penny punching, which while it takes a while to charge up and can leave you open, it can really decimate enemies if you can land it. Also, I've noticed you have this thing that's called the emergency pushback, where if you push the Y and B buttons together, it'll push enemies back away from you and it'll deal a little bit of damage. And if you charge that up, it'll take away a tiny bit of your HP, but then force enemies way back. It's very good in a pinch. The issue I have with combat is balancing. The game starts off and admittedly it's a little difficult, but nothing too bad. Trust me, once you realize that yes, you have to grind a bit, you'll get the hang of it for the first couple worlds or so. By recruiting certain amounts of enemies, having certain amounts of experience and certain amounts of cash on you, you can get new suits of armor, which boost your stats and give you new special abilities. You can also put your experience towards individual stats instead of a traditional leveling system, which is cool, though admittedly you don't get a lot per level. The issue I have here with the balancing though is that some of these stages really become gauntlets. Enemies that are bosses early on end up becoming regular enemies with nothing more than a palette swap if you're lucky. And this gets to a point where you're going through wave after wave of enemy. Probably put a good 10 hours into this. By the time I got to the third world, at the very end of the third world, that final stage there's so many bosses that from previous levels you have to go through. There's so many different enemies and so many waves of enemies. I just felt tired after it. I feel like if it was just broken up, or if some of these enemies took less health, or if there weren't an issue of knockback. Yes, there's a knockback issue. Initially, I didn't think you had invincibility frames, but that is not the case. If you get hit, yes, you'll flash with invincibility for a few seconds, but sometimes you'll be knocked down, which leaves you open. So say you get knocked down by a spike trap. Before you can get up, you might be damaged by the same trap again, or by an enemy attacking you, or if you manage to defeat a set of enemies, another enemy might spawn on top of you. I feel like that's something that could have easily been alleviated. Perhaps just, give another second or two between recovering from knockback. Put another second or two between enemies spawning after you defeat a wave. I felt like there were a good amount of deaths here that could have been preventable. They were deaths that they didn't feel like it was my fault. It felt like it was the game's fault. If you grind, you'll get past that. The thing is grinding a turnoff for you? For a lot of people, it is. It has so much character. The writing's fantastic, the presentation is great, and the gameplay is original in concept, but in execution, I feel it needs a little bit of tweaking. As it stands, I feel like these issues do detract from an overall great experience and prevent this game from going from being a decent time to a great time. If this game looks interesting to you, perhaps give it a try. There's a lot to love here, but for most RPG fans, you may be better off waiting for a price drop. But you know what? That's it for today's review. I'd like to once again thank NIS America for sending me a review code of this really just original game. I was looking forward to this beforehand, and I'm happy I got a chance to review it. So, with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know any games you'd like for me to review in the future down in the comment section below. And while you're at it, why don't you subscribe to Stuff We Play for more great content like this. So stay classy, and I'll see you next time.